Soulcaster.
The baby in his arms was wrapped in what looked like a motel towel. Torn edges, no blanket, skin too pale. But it wasn't the baby that stopped my breath mid-sip. It was the boy's eyes, that exact shade of fractured blue. The way his mouth curled on the left when he spoke, like he was always a second away from apologizing. I'd seen that face. Once, years ago, just before everything turned to ash. I dropped my wineglass, didn't even feel it shatter across the marble. Channel 8's camera panned too fast, but it was enough. A makeshift camp under the I-76 overpass, folding chairs, plastic tarps, and him, rocking that baby like the world hadn't given up on him first. They said his name was Tommy, no last name, just Tommy, 19, father, homeless. That anchor kept talking, some soft segment on youth shelters and local charities, but I couldn't hear anything except the blood pounding in my ears. I leaned forward like getting closer would make the screen confess something. My pulse kicked at my ribcage when he turned his face just a little more toward the camera. And then I saw it. A faint scar above his right eyebrow. Not new, not accidental. "Gregory," I whispered. First time I'd said my son's name aloud in almost 2 decades. I didn't expect the sound of it to hurt so much, like swallowing broken glass with a smile. My hand fumbled for the remote. I rewound the clip, paused, zoomed. Those weren't just eyes I'd seen before. They were inherited, carbon copies, a generation misplaced. This wasn't some delusion of a lonely old woman desperate for ghosts to return. I know what I saw, and if I was wrong, so be it. But if I was right... I pressed the intercom button near the window. "Jacques, call the hangar. Tell them I'll be wheels up in 30 minutes. Pack for 2 days. No staff. No questions." He hesitated, only slightly. "Understood, madam." I didn't need to think. There wasn't time for caution or etiquette or whatever boundaries 72-year-old widows were supposed to observe. A child was under that bridge. My child's child. Possibly. Probably. And no one, not Channel 8, not the city, not even God himself, was going to stop me from finding out. I grabbed the old manila envelope from my drawer before I left, the one marked Gregory, personal, that I hadn't opened since the lawyer gave it to me, just in case. Outside, the city lights looked like static, expensive, endless noise. And somewhere in that noise, a boy with my blood was watching his baby sleep under a tarp, believing the world had written him off, believing, if what I feared was true, that I was dead. Before I walked out the door, I took one last look at the paused screen. Tommy's hand was covering the baby's head protectively. Something about it. It was the same way Gregory used to hold his little sister's head when she'd cry at night. Gentle, like he thought she might crumble if he squeezed too hard. If you're reading this far, take a second and hit that follow. More than 99% of you don't, and it's what keeps stories like this coming. It means more than you know. The jet was ready by the time I got to the tarmac. My team had already pulled the segment and scrubbed local footage for more angles. The photo we found wasn't much. Someone's blurry shot posted on Reddit with a caption, "Young dad living under the bridge, kid always bundled up. Sad stuff." The comments were brutal. Keyboard empathy by way of emojis. But I didn't need clarity. I needed confirmation. I didn't tell the pilot where we were going until I was seated. Denver. A city I hadn't been back to since my son died, since I buried an urn in a garden without ever holding a hand. The jet cut through clouds like it had purpose. I sat alone, wrapped in the silence of expensive leather and regrets. I kept seeing Gregory at 17. How thin he looked, how wrecked. She'd vanished overnight. Pregnant. No goodbye. Her family didn't just disapprove of him. They treated him like he'd infected her. I remember standing outside her father's office, screaming into locked doors while he told me we were unfit. White trash with tech money, he'd said. Then came the call. The baby didn't make it. A single sentence that ended a lifetime before it began. But what if that call was a lie? My son spiraled after that. Quietly, elegantly. He graduated top of his class, got accepted into Stanford, and then one day he just didn't wake up. Heart defect, they said. Grief, I knew. I pressed my palm flat against the window as the jet started to descend. Snow dusted the Rockies like powdered sugar, beautiful from above, cruel up close. I wasn't here to ask permission. I was here to find a boy and a baby who didn't know I existed, who probably believed I never cared. But I did. I always did. And now, I would prove it. The wind under the bridge carried a dampness that cut through my coat like needles. The stench hit me first. Urine, wet cardboard, unwashed despair. But I didn't flinch. I'd stepped over worse in boardrooms full of men with softer hands and colder hearts. Jacques parked 2 blocks away. He offered to come with me just in case, but I saw the hesitation in his eyes. Wealth made people soft. I wasn't here to be soft. Wait in the car, I said. If I'm not back in 20 minutes, call Dr. Penn and tell him to prep the nursery. He blinked. Yes, madam. The encampment stretched like a makeshift village, tents patched with duct tape, sagging under the weight of freezing November air. A man in a tattered Broncos hoodie looked up as I passed, his face so gaunt it seemed translucent. A woman, barefoot, swollen with pregnancy, tugged her coat tighter over her belly as I nodded politely. But then I saw him. On the far side of the concrete support beam, just beyond the garbage fire, a boy sat on a flattened crate. His knees were tucked up, and in his lap, wrapped in what looked like someone's discarded hoodie, was a baby. He was bouncing the child gently, whispering something. His hands moved automatically, like they'd done this 1,000 nights before. A battered green backpack leaned against his leg. The same backpack from the news footage. I stepped closer. My heels clicked once on the gravel before I slipped them off and walked the rest in silence. Let him see me without threat. Let him decide. He didn't hear me until I was 10 feet away. Then he looked up. That face. My God. It was like Gregory had been resurrected through shadows and sorrow. Except this version had darker circles under his eyes, cracked knuckles, a scar under his chin, and a reflexive twitch when someone got too close. His mouth opened like he might say something, but the words caught. I took one breath and asked, "What's your name?" His whole body stiffened. He shifted slightly, shielding the baby with one arm. "Tommy," he said, low and wary. His eyes flicked behind me, scanning for whatever threat I'd brought. I felt my mouth tremble before the words even formed. "Tommy, I'm your grandmother." He didn't blink, didn't even breathe, just stared at me like I'd said I was Santa Claus or the ghost of Elvis. Then he laughed, short, bitter. "You're dead," he said, his voice cracking halfway through. "They told me you were dead." There was a beat of silence so long it roared in my ears. "No," I said, trying to steady my voice. "No, sweetheart. That's what they wanted you to believe." His jaw clenched, eyes narrowing. "Who the hell are you?" I'm Margaret Langston, I said. Your father's mother. He shook his head. My dad died before I was born. And his mum, she was an addict or something, died of liver failure. That's what they said. Who told you that? I asked gently. He looked away, jaw twitching. My mum's cousin, Frank. Of course it was Frank. The same Frank who refused to speak to me after the funeral. The same man who'd told me to stop digging up the past. I crouched slowly, knees creaking in protest, and pulled a photo from my coat pocket. A copy of the last picture I had of Gregory, age 17, holding up a science fair trophy with that same lopsided grin. Tommy stared at it. His lips parted, and something cracked across his face. A quiet implosion. "This is your dad," I whispered. "And those eyes you've got, I'd know them in the dark." He didn't speak, just looked down at the baby in his lap, who was fussing now, red-faced and cold. I reached into my coat again, pulled out a folded cashmere baby blanket. "May I?" Tommy hesitated. His grip on the baby shifted. Then he nodded. I stepped forward and wrapped the child carefully, tucking the corners just like I'd practiced for months with Gregory's little sister all those years ago. The baby calmed slightly, curling into the warmth. "My God," I breathed. "You've been doing this alone?" His mouth twitched again. Not quite a smirk, not quite a sob. I figured it out. The bitterness wasn't theatrical, it was earned. "How old is she?" I asked. 6 months. "What's her name?" He hesitated. "Lena." I smiled, though my heart was breaking. Beautiful, strong name. He didn't respond, just stared down at her, fingers still trembling. I sat beside him on the crate, ignoring the damp. Let silence do its work. After a long minute, he said, "Why now?" "Because I saw your face," I said, "and because I never stopped looking." He shook his head. "They said you didn't want him, that you told my mum to leave." I closed my eyes, swallowing the scream rising up my throat. "That's not true." He was quiet again. The kind of quiet you get when every foundation you've built your identity on starts to tilt. Finally, he whispered, "Are you really her? His mum?" I looked at him, this beautiful, exhausted, suspicious boy, clutching a child with eyes too big for her face, and I said the only thing that mattered. "I am, and I'm here now." He didn't say yes. He just stood there after I wrapped Lena, blinking like the cold had finally gotten under his skin. Then he looked down at her, really looked, saw how her lips had started to take on that faint bluish tinge around the edges, how her breathing had gone shallow and choppy. That did it. That was the hinge moment, the unspoken deal. He said, "Where?" Like it was a demand, not a question, like I might be carting them off to some institution. I didn't flinch. "Private clinic. My doctor's already on standby." Tommy didn't ask how I had a doctor ready before he agreed. Smart boy. He already knew I was working in time zones he hadn't lived in yet. He packed his entire life into that green backpack, which I noticed now was held together with nylon cord and what looked like a shoelace. I offered to carry it. He ignored me. By the time we reached the car, Lena had started to cry, soft at first, then ragged. I held her carefully, felt her head burning against my collarbone. Tommy watched from the other side of the back seat, arms crossed, legs tense, like he expected the leather to eat him alive. I didn't speak. Neither did he. At the hangar, Jacques opened the jet's door as soon as the car stopped. The plane was warm, scentless. pristine. Tommy hesitated at the bottom of the steps. "I've never been on a plane," he said. "First class?" I offered. He gave me a look. "I've never been inside an airport." Lena whimpered in my arms. He climbed the steps. Inside, he froze in the aisle, took in the white leather seats, the polished brass fixtures, the wet bar stocked with things he didn't recognize. His eyes narrowed like the whole thing might disappear if he blinked wrong. "You want something to drink?" I asked. "Water? Ginger ale?" He just sat down, slowly, stiffly. I took the seat across from him. The baby was sweating now, forehead damp and hot, her fingers twitching. I reached for the phone and patched into the onboard system. "Dr. Penn, ETA 90 minutes, fever's climbing, breathing shallow. Have a pediatric team at the house." Tommy's head snapped up. "At the house?" "My house. You'll stay there until she's stable." His mouth worked, but no sound came out. Instead, he just rubbed his face with both hands, like he was trying to wake up from a dream he didn't ask for. The jet started to taxi. He gripped the armrests immediately, back going rigid. "You're okay," I said gently. "Smooth takeoff. She'll sleep through it." "She sleeps through sirens," he said, then looked shocked that he'd told me anything at all. We were in the air before either of us spoke again. Tommy watched me with quiet suspicion, like he was trying to decode me using only context clues and bad memories. Finally, he asked, "Why now? Why me?" I turned Lena in my arms so I could check her fever, still rising. I unwrapped her slightly, let the cool cabin air touch her damp neck. Then I looked at him. "Because you were never supposed to be lost." He frowned. "That's not an answer." I leaned back. "No, it's the only answer." Tommy's face twisted. "You know what they told me? That my dad's mum was a drunk who vanished when he got a girl pregnant. That he died a loser. And that his family didn't want either of us." I exhaled through my nose. "That was by design." He squinted. "Design?" "Erasure," I said. "They didn't want you to exist. So they made it so you didn't." He was quiet a long time. Then he said, "Well, they did a good job." Lena stirred again. I brushed a curl off her cheek. "She looks like him," I said. "I wouldn't know," he replied. That hurt more than I expected. "You will," I promised. "If you want to." He didn't answer. I stood and walked to the back of the jet, opened one of the smaller storage cabinets, and pulled out a quilted bassinet we'd never used. It was meant for guests who never came. I laid Lena inside it, layering the cashmere blanket over her, propping a soft bear near her shoulder. Tommy watched me like I was performing some foreign ritual. When I turned back, he was standing now, not relaxed, not comfortable, but upright, ready. "This isn't forever," he said, a warning. "I know. You don't get to keep us." "I don't intend to. I'll leave when I want." "Of course." He looked down at the baby, then back at me. "But I'm staying until she's okay." That one sentence, stiff, sharp-edged, defensive, was the closest thing to a peace offering I'd get. I took it. "Good," I said. "That's all I ask." We flew in silence, the hum of the engines the only buffer between our two broken timelines. Tommy stared out the window like he'd finally realized the sky wasn't just something you looked at when sleeping under a bridge. It was something you could move through. Still, he never asked me what came next. And I never told him. Because next was going to be complicated. Next meant peeling open years of buried truths. Next meant letting him hate me, if that's what he needed to heal. But for now, he'd followed me into the air, and that was more than enough. The house was too quiet for its size. That kind of curated quiet, like in luxury watch boutiques, everything soft and intentional, so silence itself felt expensive. As we pulled through the gates, Tommy leaned forward in his seat, trying to take it all in. The long stone driveway, the manicured hedges, the kind of fountain that didn't even pretend to be modest. This was a home built by someone who'd known power long enough to stop needing to prove it. He said nothing as we got out of the car. He just picked Lena up, clutched his backpack, and followed me up the stairs like a boy being led into the lion's den, wearing hand-me-down shoes. I opened the door. He paused. The foyer hit him like a punch. Vaulted ceilings, the glint of crystal overhead, the faint scent of eucalyptus and lemon wood polish. I watched him look up at the chandelier as if it might fall on him at any moment. A scar ran down the side of his neck, partially hidden by the collar of his jacket. It hadn't been there in the news footage. I made a note. Not now. Later. The warmth of the house wrapped around Lena instantly, and her breathing eased just enough to make me unclench for the first time since the bridge. Tommy's arms shifted, adjusting her head against his chest as he stepped inside. The marble tile clicked under his shoes. He walked slowly, scanning everything, the walls, the furniture, the art, like he was casing the place. I didn't blame him. He passed a mirror and flinched. I pretended not to notice. "This way," I said, leading him down the hallway. He stopped at the kitchen entrance. His eyes landed on the massive, gleaming fridge, and then the counter where a basket of oranges sat untouched. He stared at it too long, like it wasn't real. "You hungry?" I asked. "No," a beat. "I mean, yeah, I just didn't think about it." I opened the fridge. "Take what you want." He didn't move, so I grabbed a bottle of water and handed it to him. He took it like I was handing him a contract. I brought him to the nursery next. We hadn't used that room in over a decade, but it had been cleaned weekly, restocked twice a year, just in case. Just in case he existed. Just in case one day the world cracked open and poured him back into it. The walls were painted a soft grey, with hand-painted swallows swooping near the ceiling. The crib was mahogany. The mobile above it spun with little brass moons and stars. The changing table was still stocked with unopened wipes and diapers. The rocking chair, well-worn but elegant, faced the bay window. I set the bassinet gently beside the crib. Tommy walked in, slowly, like he was stepping onto holy ground. He didn't speak for a full minute, just looked, touched one of the swallows on the wall. "This was already here?" he asked finally. I nodded. "I had it built when I found out my son was going to be a father." His brow furrowed. "But you said they told you the baby died." "They did, but I kept the room." I paused. "Sometimes, when everything else feels like a lie, you cling to one truth you hope comes back." He turned to me, and his voice changed, harder now, more direct. "Why would you keep this for someone you didn't even know?" I didn't answer right away. I walked over to the chair, sank into it slowly, and looked at him. "Because I lost your father," I said, "and I never forgave myself." His arms tensed around Lena. He didn't look convinced. "Was he like me?" he asked. I smiled. "You're more alike than you know." He looked away. "He left me." "No," I said quietly. He was never given the chance to stay. Tommy pressed his lips into a tight line. His jaw clenched. I watched him scan the room again, slower this time. A different kind of tension building behind his eyes, less awe, more suspicion. "So," he said, "you built a shrine to a maybe grandchild, stocked a whole room for a ghost. That's not normal." I didn't disagree. "No, it's not. You some kind of control freak?" "Yes," I said, "but not for the reasons you think." He stared at me, waiting for more. I didn't give it. He wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, I stood and walked to the bookshelf near the changing table, pulled out a faded blue children's book. Your father's favorite. He made me read this until I had it memorized. I held it out to him. He took it reluctantly, flipped through the pages, then handed it back. "I don't remember being read to." He said it flat. No emotion. But I felt the crack underneath. "I'm sorry you didn't have that," I told him. He blinked, like he didn't know what to do with something as useless as sympathy. I stepped back toward the door. "There's a guest room prepared. You can sleep there or stay in here with Lena. I'll have clothes sent up. Whatever you don't want, we'll get rid of." He didn't say anything. Before I left, I added, "There's a bell on the dresser, if you need anything." His brow arched. "Like a service bell?" I smiled faintly. Like I said, control freak. He didn't smile back, just stood there in a nursery built on hope and unfinished grief, holding the only thing left in his world worth fighting for. And as I closed the door, I knew he was already wondering what I wasn't telling him. Because beneath every generous gesture, every curated detail, every too perfect coincidence, he could feel it. There was something else. Something I hadn't said. Something I couldn't say yet. And Tommy Langston was not the kind of boy who stopped asking. We sat in the study with the door closed. Thick oak, double-panelled, the kind of door that makes silence heavier once it's shut. I'd always liked this room. Gregory used to call it the cave when he was a teenager, back when he still thought I didn't notice the whiskey going missing from the decanter. Tommy sat on the edge of the leather chair like it might burn him. His knees bounced, eyes darting from the shelves of books to the fireplace, to the framed photographs scattered across the desk. None of them were staged, just moments I kept. My son's graduation, my daughter's wedding, a blurry photo of Gregory as a toddler in the backyard, standing barefoot on a sprinkler hose, grinning with the kind of joy you only see in people who haven't learned about betrayal yet. Tommy noticed the picture. "That him?" he asked, pointing. I nodded. He was 3. We'd just installed the new system, and he soaked the entire lawn before I realized what he was doing, laughed for an hour straight. Tommy didn't smile. "He looks like me." "You look like him." He picked up the photo, stared at it too long. "Frank said my dad was a waste of space, said he knocked my mum up and ran off like a coward." My breath snagged on the edge of 1,000 unsaid things. "He said you—" Tommy paused. His voice went colder. "He said you were drunk most days, that you didn't want my dad, that he was raised by his aunt until she died, and then he just disappeared." I didn't say anything at first. I stood slowly, walked over to the desk, and turned the photo of Gregory face down. "That's not what happened." "Yeah?" Tommy challenged. "Then what did?" "He loved your mother. Desperately, stupidly. He was 17 and terrified. And she was— God, she was wild. Not cruel, but selfish. Her parents found out she was pregnant, and they sent her away overnight. They cut off all contact. Tommy leaned back, crossing his arms. Frank said she was a runaway. She ran, all right, but not toward freedom. She ran into a cage her family built for her. He frowned. And what about you? They told me she'd had a miscarriage, that the baby didn't survive. His eyes narrowed. And you believed that? I had no reason not to. They made sure of that. I turned toward the bookshelf and pulled down a lacquered box. Gregory had made it in shop class. It looked like nothing, just a dusty piece of teenager craft, but I'd hidden something inside it for decades. I set it on the desk, pressed a hidden latch on the bottom. A false panel lifted. Tommy's eyebrows twitched as I pulled out a thick folder of documents. Letters, I said, laying them out. Hospital records, photos, every shred of evidence I could find after Gregory died. Tommy's fingers hovered above the pages like they were radioactive. I handed him a letter, creased, handwritten in looping script. His mother's. Found it in a file sent to me by mistake, dated 3 weeks before you were born. He scanned it. His lips moved silently as he read. He didn't finish it, just dropped it like it burned him. Then he reached for the birth certificate. I watched his hands shake as he unfolded it. The paper was thin, old, and the ink had started to fade, but the name was clear enough. Father, Gregory Langston. Mother, Elise Marie Warner. Child, Thomas Langston Warner. He froze. I didn't even know my last name, he said quietly. Not the real one. Frank had me using Warner. Of course he did. Why? Because if you knew who you were, you'd start asking the wrong questions. He dropped the certificate, stared at me like I'd undone the gravity in the room. I thought my whole life was just bad luck, he said. A bunch of crap circumstances, like maybe I'd done something to deserve it. I sat across from him, hands folded. You didn't. You were born into a lie. He shook his head. Frank. He made it sound like you were the worst kind of person. He said my dad OD'd, that you used to hit him, that nobody came to the funeral. I bit the inside of my cheek. Gregory died in his sleep. Heart defect. I was the only one at the service because they didn't tell me he'd died until 2 months later. Tommy pressed his fists into his temples like he could push the words out of his head. He showed me pictures, empty bottles, said you lived in motels. Those weren't mine. And the urn? There wasn't even a grave. Because they cremated him before I could claim the body. No notice, no call. Tommy stood, pacing now. Why would he lie like that? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I opened another folder. Inside were photos. One of a baby in a hospital blanket. One of a toddler on a beach, eyes squinting against the sun. A few school reports. All of them copies I'd paid private investigators to find over the years. Fragments. Shadows. I think Frank was paid to keep you hidden, I said. Or at least convinced it was the right thing. Maybe he believed it. Maybe he just liked having the power. I don't know. Tommy dropped into the chair like his legs had failed him. I don't even know who I am. I reached out, rested a hand near his on the desk, close but not touching. You're my grandson. He looked up, and something behind his eyes broke wide open. I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything. Not yet. He ran a hand through his hair. Everything I thought I knew, what I hated, what I blamed, it's all built on someone else's story, I said. Tommy laughed bitterly. No wonder it never made sense. Then he picked up the birth certificate again and stared at it for a long time, like it might finally tell him the truth, or at least a place to start. He didn't eat dinner that night. The roast sat untouched on his plate, the potatoes stiffening under the weight of silence. Lena was upstairs with the nurse, just for the night, just so he could breathe, I'd said. He hadn't agreed exactly, but he hadn't fought me either. He looked too tired to argue, or maybe too numb. After 20 minutes of fork pushing and 1,000-yard stares, I set my napkin down and said, "Come with me." He followed without a word. Not out of trust. I didn't mistake it for that. But because something in him needed to keep moving, like stillness might swallow him whole. I took him to the back library, less formal than the main study, smaller, warmer, fire already lit. One of the few rooms in the house I didn't decorate for guests. He sat on the edge of the couch again. That was his thing. I was learning, never fully resting, like if he let his guard down too far, he might never get it back up again. I sat across from him, pulled a stack of files and folders from the coffee table, and placed them beside me. Then I took a breath I hadn't realized I was holding since the moment I saw his face on the news. "I want to tell you everything," I said, "and I need you to understand that it's going to sound insane." Tommy didn't blink. "Try me." So I did. "Your father, Gregory, was 17 when he met your mother. She was from an old money family in Colorado Springs. Very proper. Very Catholic. They weren't thrilled when their only daughter started sneaking out to date a kid from Denver whose mother ran a startup out of a basement." I gave a dry laugh. "Gregory used to wear these hideous second-hand blazers to impress her. He thought it made him look respectable." Tommy's mouth twitched, barely. "She got pregnant in spring. Senior year. She was scared. He was terrified. But they were trying to figure it out. We were going to support them. I'd even spoken to a lawyer about guardianship options." I looked down at the folder in my lap, fingering the edge of it. Then one day she was just gone. Her number disconnected. Her family stopped answering calls. Gregory drove to her house and they wouldn't let him pass the gate. Tommy's jaw tightened. "Frank said he left her." I shook my head. "They made her leave. They sent her to some facility in upstate New York. It was a thing those families did. Send the daughter away to recover, hide the pregnancy, keep everything quiet." "They told you she left?" he asked. "They told me she terminated, that the baby didn't make it." His face paled. "Just like that?" "Just like that." I reached for another folder, thinner, older. Inside was a photocopy of a telegram, a single line of type. "Elise has lost the baby. Please give Gregory space to grieve." No return address, no follow-up, just that. Tommy leaned forward, gripping his knees like they were the only solid thing in the room. "And you believed them?" "I didn't want to," I said. "But what choice did I have? They disappeared her. Gregory was destroyed. I've never seen him cry like that, not even when his father died." He looked away, jaw clenched. "And then a year later, Gregory was gone too. I buried him with half of himself missing, and I didn't know why until much later." "When?" I swallowed. "After he died, I hired a firm, a good one. I wanted answers. I got scraps, hints that Elise had had the baby, that she'd been moved again, but nothing concrete. No adoption records, no legal trail. They covered it well." He looked at me, eyes glassy. "So you didn't abandon him?" I leaned in, hands clasped tightly together. "Sweetheart, I searched for you for years. I spent more money than some people earn in a lifetime trying to find you. I hired lawyers, investigators, even an ex-FBI profiler. I put ads in local papers under pseudonyms. I had standing alerts on every school record database I could access. I looked for you in shelters, in hospitals, in state custody systems. Nothing. They erased you, both of you. Tommy's hands were shaking again. He didn't try to hide it this time. Frank said my mum OD'd when I was 5. I don't even know if that's true. It might be. I haven't been able to confirm. But if it is, I hesitated. Then he raised you without telling you who you were, without ever trying to contact me. He nodded, slow and bitter. Because I was a paycheck. I frowned. What do you mean? State checks, disability grants, food stamps. He used me like a punch card. I felt the rage bubble up like it always did when helplessness met hindsight. I should have found you. It wasn't your fault. Isn't it? I said, quiet. I was too late. I always thought maybe, just maybe, if I'd pushed harder, if I'd gone to court, if I'd made more noise. You didn't know where to make it, he interrupted. Silence stretched. The fire crackled. I watched the shadows move across his face, saw the muscle tick in his cheek. He finally looked up. I hated you. My whole life, I hated a version of you that never even existed. I didn't speak, just let him say it. I thought you were this evil ghost who abandoned her junkie son and let him die alone. And now, he trailed off, lost. And now you know the story. Yeah, but I don't know what to do with it. You don't have to do anything, I said gently. Just sit with it. That's enough for now. He nodded, barely, then whispered, I don't know who I'm supposed to be anymore. I leaned back, exhaled slowly. That's the beautiful part. You get to decide. And for the first time since we met, Tommy didn't look like he wanted to bolt from the room. He just looked tired. But not alone. It started with a cough, a soft one, then sharper. Lena had been warm all morning, but babies get fevers. That's what the nurse said. Still, something about her colour felt off. Her lips were dry, her eyes glassier than before. She wasn't fussing, not really. She was too quiet. Tommy knew before I said anything. I saw it in the way his shoulders stiffened when I touched her forehead. He didn't panic, but he hovered so close it felt like he was trying to shield her from air itself. Get the car, I said. We're going downtown. He didn't ask which hospital. He just strapped her into the car seat with hands that shook and lips that pressed together so tight they went white at the corners. By the time we reached the private pediatric center, Lena was wheezing softly in her sleep, and Tommy looked ready to punch the next person who asked him to wait. The waiting room was tasteful chaos, well-dressed mothers scrolling through phones, a nanny trying to coax a toddler into a chair with a gluten-free snack, a baby screaming somewhere behind the closed exam doors. No one looked up when we walked in, until the receptionist, mid-40s, perfect teeth, the kind of smile trained to disarm lawsuits, read the form Tommy filled out and stopped mid-keystroke. Thomas Langston, she repeated, blinking. Sorry, are you related to Gregory Langston? Tommy shrugged, thrown. He was my dad. She stared for a beat too long, then looked past him, at me. I stepped forward. Gregory was my son. Silence settled over the desk like fog. Another receptionist glanced up. I saw her eyes widen just slightly before she nudged a nurse walking by. The nurse turned, caught sight of me and immediately ducked into the hallway. The woman at the desk stood. "Of course. Right this way." Tommy frowned. "Wait, we didn't even check in." "It's fine," I said. "They have what they need." A door opened behind the counter, the same hallway everyone else had been waiting to enter. Tommy hesitated, still holding Lena close to his chest. "Come," I said softly. "They're expecting us now." We moved past the families still waiting. One mother looked up, saw the nurse guiding us, and whispered something into her phone. No one objected. No one even blinked. Inside the hallway, the nurse said nothing. She just held the door to exam room 2 open and waited. Tommy sat in the corner chair, pulling Lena gently into his lap. The doctor appeared 2 minutes later. Dr. Sani, the best pediatric pulmonologist in the state. I'd made the call 20 minutes earlier from the car. The moment I said my name, she cleared her schedule. She stepped in and greeted us with a nod. "She's had trouble breathing since this morning," Tommy said immediately, his voice hoarse. "Fever spiked yesterday. Nurse said it was just a cold, but she's not eating, and her ribs move weird when she breathes. It looks wrong." Dr. Sani was already listening to Lena's chest. Her face didn't give anything away, which worried me more than if she'd frowned. "We'll do a chest x-ray," she said. "Start fluids. I want labs to rule out RSV." Tommy tensed. "Is she going to be okay?" "We'll know more in an hour," she replied gently. "But you brought her in at the right time." He didn't move, didn't exhale. I put a hand on his shoulder. He didn't shake it off. After they wheeled Lena out for tests, we sat in the empty room, surrounded by soft murals of forests and cartoon birds. Tommy leaned forward, elbows on knees, eyes fixed on the door like he could will it to open faster. He finally spoke. "What just happened out there?" "What do you mean?" "The front desk. The nurse. The doctor showing up like she was already on the floor." "They know the name," I said simply. He gave me a look. "So what? We got bumped because of your son's last name?" "No," I said, turning to face him. "Because of what the name built." He blinked. "What did he build?" I pointed to a small bronze plaque near the corner of the hallway. Subtle, nearly hidden unless you knew where to look. It read, "Gregory Langston Pediatric Wing, in honor of a son loved beyond measure." Tommy stared at it for a long time. His throat bobbed when he swallowed. "You did that?" "I did it for him," I said. "He always wanted to be a father. I thought it was the least I could do." Tommy leaned back, resting his head against the wall, eyes closed. "No one's ever opened a door for me before," he muttered. "They will now. I don't want it if it's just out of guilt. It's not. It's yours by blood. What you do with it, that's up to you." He opened his eyes, looked at me hard. "You don't even know me." "I know your father, and I know what it took for you to survive long enough to end up here. That's not nothing." He went quiet, then nodded once. "Still feels like someone else's life." "That's because it was stolen from you." We waited in silence for a few minutes, both of us breathing in the sterile calm of the clinic. Then the nurse returned with a faint smile and a clipboard. "She's stable," she said. "Breathing's improving already. The doctor will go over everything with you soon. But for now, she's okay." Tommy didn't cry. He just closed his eyes, tilted his head back, and let out a breath so long and heavy I thought it might cave in the ceiling. I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. In that moment, he saw it. Not just the weight of the name, but the force behind it. the reach of it. And for the first time, he wasn't just the boy under the bridge anymore. He was a Langston, and the world had just remembered. We didn't talk about it for a while. After Lena stabilized, after the clinic and the sleepless night that followed, Tommy stayed quiet. Not sullen, not shut down, just suspended. Like he was floating somewhere between past and present, trying to piece together the shape of grief that had been handed to him second-hand. It happened the next afternoon. We were sitting on the terrace, him holding Lena like she was made of glass, sunlight dappling through the vines overhead. I'd just come out with 2 mugs, one coffee, one chamomile. His preferred choice since discovering espresso made his hands shake. He didn't look at me when he asked, "Where is he?" I didn't pretend not to know what he meant. I sat down beside him and set the mugs on the table. "About 40 minutes outside the city," I said. "Private garden. I bought the plot years ago, when it became clear no one else would mark the place he belonged to." "Is there a headstone?" "No." "Why not?" I exhaled slowly. "Because I didn't know where to put it, or what to write. They cremated him before I could say goodbye. By the time I knew he was gone, it had already been a year. There wasn't even a service, just a delivery." He turned then, looking at me fully, Lena sleeping against his chest in her soft cloud of pink fleece. "They didn't tell you?" he asked. "No." He stared at me for a moment, brows drawn tight, like he wanted to accuse someone, but couldn't figure out who deserved it most. "I want to see him," he said. I nodded. "We'll go now." The ride was quiet, but not empty. Tommy held Lena in her car seat beside him, one hand resting over her chest like an anchor. He stared out the window, not blinking much, not speaking. I drove. No driver, no staff, just us. The garden was behind a chapel, tucked into a wooded hill just past the outer suburbs. It wasn't a cemetery, not in the traditional sense. There were no neat rows or polished angels, just stones embedded in the earth, wildflowers blooming in curated chaos, trees planted in memory of people whose families hadn't wanted cold markers or marble monuments. We parked at the base of the path. I carried a small bundle in a canvas bag, flowers and something else. Tommy walked slowly, Lena now swaddled and asleep again, cradled against his chest. He said nothing as we moved past the other memorials, the plaques hidden in the ground, the names carved into the boulders at odd angles. We stopped at the edge of a small clearing beneath a red maple tree. The stone wasn't marked, just a flat slate piece nestled into the earth, a single line etched faintly along the border. G.L. Always loved, never forgotten. "I had it placed there 10 years ago," I said. "The urn's beneath it. They mailed it to me in a cardboard box." He stared down at the stone, then back at me. "They mailed you your son?" I nodded. "That's Jesus." "I know." He didn't move for a long time, just stood there, gently swaying as Lena slept. Then he whispered, "He really died thinking I was gone." I couldn't answer. I couldn't lie, and I couldn't soften the truth. So I said nothing. Finally, he knelt, carefully, as if the ground itself might give way beneath him. He reached out and touched the stone, fingers brushing the carved initials like they were braille he hadn't learned to read yet. "Hey," he whispered, barely audible. "I made it." My throat closed. "I'm sorry you didn't get to see her," he said, eyes locked on the stone. "Or me. But I'm here." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded photo, one we'd printed from the nursery camera that morning. Lena, mid-laugh, blurry but perfect. He set it on the stone, anchored it with a pebble. "She looks like you," he added. "Poor kid." I smiled, just barely. "She does, but I think she's got your chin." He sat there, just watching the wind move through the maple branches. I crouched beside him and reached into the canvas bag, pulled out a tiny wooden box. "What's that?" he asked. "A piece of him," I said. "Not literal. A lock of his hair, some ashes, and this." I opened the box. Inside was a silver chain with a small, plain pendant. I handed it to him. "He wore this every day after your mother left. It was my father's. He gave it to Gregory when he turned 16. Gregory never took it off. Not once." Tommy stared at it like it might disintegrate. Then he looped the chain around his neck, tucking the pendant under his shirt. He didn't say thank you. He didn't have to. We sat there for what felt like an hour, neither of us speaking, just listening to the wind and the distant rustle of leaves and the occasional creak of the chapel bell far off down the hill. When Lena stirred, Tommy stood. His knees cracked, and he winced, like grief had aged him 20 years in a single kneel. As we walked back toward the car, he glanced at me sideways. "I used to think funerals were for closure," he said, "like clean endings. But this feels worse." "They're not for closure," I said. "They're for witnesses." He frowned. "So someone else can say, 'I saw this. I felt this. I remember.'" He looked down at Lena, then back at the stone, then at me. "Well," he said, "now he's got both of us." And for the first time, I think he believed it. I kept it simple. No linen napkins, no vintage wine, no servers gliding in and out like ghosts in white gloves. Just roasted chicken, 2 side dishes, and a warm berry crumble that filled the kitchen with the scent of something softer than history. I plated it myself, set the table myself, poured water from a pitcher instead of a crystal decanter. I wanted Tommy to know this wasn't about grandeur or performance. It was just dinner, just family. Something he'd probably never had before without conditions stapled to it. He came downstairs slowly, Lena tucked into the crook of his arm, already bathed and fed and dozing off, her little hand clenched around one of his fingers. He looked tired but not brittle anymore, like something inside him had decided to stay upright. "Smells good," he said, eyeing the food like it might disappear if he complimented it too much. "It's edible," I replied. "Can't say the same about my crème brûlée, but we'll avoid that crisis for now." A flicker of a smile. Barely there, but it was progress. He sat down across from me and shifted Lena into the bassinet beside him, checking her twice, maybe 3 times, before he reached for his fork. We ate mostly in silence at first. He devoured the food like someone who hadn't known the luxury of second helpings in years. I let him. Every scrape of his fork on the plate felt like a small rebellion against the life he'd been handed. After a while, I set my fork down and leaned back. "I'm not going to pretend any of this is simple," I said. He looked up, wary again. That armor was never far from the surface. "I've spent most of my life making decisions for people," I continued. "Staff, shareholders, boardrooms, even my children. God help me, I treated them like projects." Tommy said nothing, just waited. "This time, I want the decision to be yours." He narrowed his eyes. "What decision?" "You stay here as long as you want. No strings, No expectations. Or, I paused, I help you start over. Somewhere new. A home of your own. Financial support. Legal guidance. Lena's medical care. Everything you need to build a life that doesn't come with my shadow. His fork froze mid-air. Just like that? Just like that. He put it down, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, an instinct I didn't correct, and looked at me for a long time. You really think I could do that? Absolutely. But you don't know me. I know enough. That I grew up in someone's basement? That I've stolen food? That I had to leave Lena with a stranger once just to go to work because there was no one else? I know you kept her alive when the world gave you nothing, I said. That's all I need to know. He looked down at Lena again, her tiny chest rising and falling with the kind of peace that costs more than most people can afford. I don't want her to grow up like I did, he said. Afraid, small, lied to. She won't. He looked at me, eyes clearer than I'd seen them since he arrived. I want her to grow up with love, with truth. I nodded. Then let's rewrite this story together. He blinked, like the sentence had struck something he hadn't dared to name. Then he nodded too. Okay. Not a shout, not a promise, just a quiet agreement, the kind that means more than ceremony. I stood and cleared the plates while he rocked Lena gently in his arms, humming something low and unmelodic but soothing all the same. When I returned with mugs of chamomile tea, he'd tucked her against his chest, her tiny hand curling under his shirt like she belonged there. You said you used to run a business, he said, sipping. Several, he smirked. Figures. You run your kitchen like a CFO. I'll take that as a compliment. He hesitated. You think you could teach me? How to, not just survive? I looked at him, really looked. The boy with his father's chin and his mother's guarded eyes. The boy who'd somehow managed to stay human, despite a world that tried to erase him. Absolutely, I said. And just like that, the table didn't feel like a performance stage anymore. It felt like a blueprint, something we could build on. But even as we sat there, sipping tea and pretending time was our ally, I knew the weight hadn't left us. Not really. Old wounds still sat in the walls of this house like mold under fresh paint. Secrets don't vanish just because we stop speaking them aloud. Still, there was something in Tommy's voice when he said, okay, that made me believe we had a shot. Not at healing, maybe. Not yet. But at truth. And sometimes, truth is the only kind of love you can build from. The house was asleep. Not quiet. Truly asleep. That thick, velvety silence that settles over old walls, when even the ghosts have laid down their burdens for the night. Outside, the wind tapped against the windows like it had somewhere better to be. Upstairs, I could just barely make out Lena's breathing through the monitor. A steady rhythm, safe, alive. Tommy had gone to bed an hour earlier, too worn out from a day of learning how to put together a crib from scratch and reading Goodnight Moon aloud, like he didn't think his voice was worthy of lullabies. He hadn't said much since dinner, just that same look in his eyes, like something was coiling and uncoiling behind them. But I couldn't sleep. Not yet. I padded down the hallway barefoot, bypassing the kitchen, ignoring the second study with the wine cabinet. Instead, I went to the West Wing, the part of the house I never brought guests. Gregory's wing. Dustless, but untouched. The safe was hidden behind a framed oil painting, an ugly one, intentionally so. I used to joke that no thief would ever bother to look behind such a tasteless disaster. Gregory hated it, but that was the point. I pressed the combination in slow sequence. 6/12/81, his birthday. The latch clicked open with a reluctant groan. Inside, a few old documents, the title to the house, a faded bundle of photographs tied with a blue ribbon, and one envelope, yellowed, unopened. The handwriting across the front was unmistakably his. If anything happens to me, that's all it said. I stared at it for a full minute. 20 years, and I'd never broken the seal. Maybe I was afraid of what it would say. Maybe I didn't think I deserved to read it. But tonight, it wasn't mine to keep anymore. I brought it upstairs. Tommy was still awake, sitting on the edge of the guest bed with his back to the door. Lena lay in the bassinet beside him, wrapped in a knitted blanket I'd found in storage, made by Gregory's grandmother decades ago. He looked up when I entered, eyes bleary but sharp. I was just checking. I couldn't sleep either, I said, holding the envelope between my fingers. He frowned. I sat beside him and handed it over. What's this? Your father wrote it before he died, I said. I found it after the cremation. I never opened it. Why? Because I think he meant it for you, even if he didn't know you were still out there. I think he hoped. Tommy didn't move. Then he took it, hands careful, reverent. He stared at the seal for a long time, as if breaking it would break something else, something sacred, something final. Then, with a slow breath, he slid his finger under the flap and peeled it open. A single page. No greeting, no date. Just Gregory's handwriting, slightly shaky, uneven in places. Tommy read silently, then again. His eyes locked on the words like they were trying to unwrite every lie Frank had ever poured into him. He didn't speak until he was finished. When he did, it came out in a whisper. He says if his child is out there, he wants them to know he loved them, that he wanted them. His voice cracked. That he hopes they can forgive him. I didn't reach for him at first. I let him hold that moment alone, because I knew how precious it was. The miracle of clarity in a lifetime of distortion. Then the tears came. Not loud, not theatrical, just quiet drops spilling down his cheeks like gravity had finally caught up to sorrow. He folded the letter carefully, pressed it to his chest, and whispered something I didn't catch. I wrapped an arm around his shoulders. He didn't pull away. Lena stirred in her sleep, let out a soft sigh, and turned toward her father's voice like she recognized the grief in it. I thought I was unwanted, Tommy murmured. My whole life. I know. I thought he didn't care. He did. I thought I came from nothing. You came from love, I said. That was stolen from you. He nodded, still holding the letter like it might vanish if he let go. I wish I had more of him, he said. Something real. You do, I said. She's sleeping right beside you. Tommy looked down at Lena, then back at the letter. And for the first time since he'd walked into my life, something in his face let go. Not all the pain, not the damage, but the part that kept him locked in defense mode, waiting for someone to disappoint him again. I'm scared, he said. So was he. He turned to me, eyes red but steady. Will you help me get it right? I didn't hesitate. Every step of the way. He looked back at Lena, then leaned his head against my shoulder. We sat there like that for a long time, grandmother, grandson, great-granddaughter. 3 generations reassembled by grief, stitched together with letters and lies, and one final truth written in shaky ink. The past hadn't disappeared, but tonight it finally exhaled. And maybe, just maybe, tomorrow could begin.